what you want. Say 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 what you want. Who's gonna save me? Who's gonna save me? Who's gonna save me? Who's gonna save me?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for waiting. Today we went a little bit late. Thank you so much for waiting, and welcome to the third podcast, to the third beta cast. First of all, let me start by introducing our guests. Our first guest is Luís Manuel, the executive board member at EDP Inovação, responsible for EDP Open Innovation Strategy, including EDP Ventures, EDP Entrepreneurship Initiatives, and the Startup Engagement Programs Starter and Free Electrons. Thank you so much for our invitation, and thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now I'm going to introduce Pieter Waller. He's a serial entrepreneur and innovator, as well as a co-founder and CCO at Chargetrip, a smart navigation platform for electric mobility, one of the successful startups creating this year's edition of the Free Electrons. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Great to be here, man.
And let me introduce our Mafalda from BetaI. She is actually the Open Innovation Program Director at BetaI, an experienced innovation consultant, worked with multiple sectors. Right now, she's focusing on creating the Global Energy Startup Program and making corporates and startups work. Thank you, novamente, Mafalda, for being here. So, I hope that everyone is there. I can see already with viewers. Just remember to share this with your friends in your networks, more people to watch this and to engage with us. Feel free also to ask questions during this podcast. Everything that you want to ask these guys, you can do it, and they will try to answer the best way that they can. So let's start by Peter. I have a question for you. We see that innovation is boosting in Portugal, and we have at the moment the Tech for COVID. That was a movement created to try to solve the tech problems during these COVID times. In that Dutch startup ecosystem, that is a very strong ecosystem. There are many initiatives happening throughout the year. How the situation looks like right now? What's happening in the Dutch ecosystem right now with all of this coronavirus stuff?
Yeah, so this is around the fourth week that the entire country is working from home, like in most places in Europe. And what has happened so far is that obviously everyone is expecting a massive economic downturn. What our like national tech and startup platform TechLeap did right at the beginning was send around to the entire startup and tech ecosystem a really big survey to actually understand what the problems were that everyone in the tech sector was facing, which resulted in getting above the water the real figures of the problem. And they said that 50% of all the startups that they surveyed would be expecting cash flow problems within a month or three. That 65% of the VCs would be more cautious in investing. So everyone was certain of an immediately cash flow problem within this massive industry that employs around, I think in the Netherlands, around 60,000 people. And the government in the Netherlands, they were very quick and forthright to introduce a set of loans and tax instruments that would save a lot of small and medium enterprises a lot of money and keep money in the bank. But startups were it wasn't super relevant for startups or their business model because it was based on last year's revenue and actually the downturn in revenue that you would experience over the next 2 or 3 months. But if you are a very early stage startup, you don't have any revenue, or if you're a scale up, then a massive drop in revenue is actually going to kill your business equally because you have the burn rate and the cost rate that you're dealing with. So a number of VCs supported with TechLeap. They sent an emergency letter to the cabinet, and actually today it was announced that there was an additional measurement, especially targeted at startups and the tech scene, creating a facility of 100 million in bridge loan facilities for startups that would to really counter the COVID-19 crisis and the economic downturn that we will most definitely experience. So that's what's happening a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, thank you for your answer, Luís. ADP is considered a corporation that is actively engaged in innovation initiatives, as you know. How was the experience of going remote?
Well, we in our regular activities, we already have to work with colleagues from Brazil, Spain, the US, and we engage in many initiatives like what Mafalda is going to talk about next for Electrons, which naturally already kind of lead us to work remotely with each other. Of course, the obvious change is that that core group of around 40 persons, that CDP Innovation, that more or less would see each other on a regular basis, like a few times every week. That nowadays happens only like this, like what we are doing now. So over the last month or so, which is when we started sending people home, basically that is the fundamental change. Nowadays, the persons that we used to see on a regular basis, we basically see them on Zoom or on Teams or one of those platforms. There are some challenges that we are still trying to grasp. For instance, how do we keep a hardware pilot going on? It's a bit there's no obvious answer for that, except that someone goes there when you have something really critical that you absolutely need to do. But apart from that, I would say there's no obvious disruption on what we have been doing so far. I think that to put a positive spin on this, I think that this is also alerting us to the possibilities that we were not seeing before. So to give you a few examples, if we have startup engagement programs going on, what we can do if we use more frequently this type of platforms, if we start talking more frequently with people remotely, it's a lot more than what we were doing, focusing on physical modules where everyone has to be present. Another thing which is very important, we have this innovation road trips into Silicon Valley and more recently also into China. It's a bit difficult to do them physically because it involves moving around some 10, 15 persons at the same time on one single place. But we are now starting to develop a way to do them remotely, and it's perfectly feasible. I mean, if even if you want to get a little bit of the physical experience of going into the electronics market in Shenzhen, you can actually put a camera on someone and you just go with him through the market. It's not difficult at all. So I think there's all the problems that Pieter is talking about, and these are going to be serious things. We know that. But there's also the other side, the opportunity side, the possibility of doing a little bit more with the same, or perhaps with less, taking into consideration that there's an economic crisis coming. So yeah, that's more or less how we are seeing it.
Thank you, Luís. And we'll have time to go back and forward about the consequences that this is going to have on the ecosystem. So we'll speak a little bit about some questions and then we get back to this subject because I really think that is a really interesting subject. Mafalda, today we want to talk more about making collaborative innovation happen remotely, and take as an example our virtual bootcamp Free Electrons. Can you present what is exactly Free Electrons, please?
Yeah, sure. So Free Electrons is an open innovation program. It's an open innovation program that connects 10 of the largest utilities of the world. So they are really in different sides of the world, and they connect them with startups, with the best startups in the market. And the focus is on finding solutions, finding innovative solutions to help them tackle their challenges and their needs, and to make pilots with these startups, which is interesting. EDP is one of the utilities that are part of Free Electrons, and these difficulties around the hardware pilots is one of the things that we will need to consider this year. So it's a program that's been around for some years now. We are in its 4th edition. And it's really based in fostering relationships between the participants. So we're talking about the utilities, and within the utilities you have the innovation teams, you have the business units. From the startup side, you have all the startups, different team members and C-levels. So in connecting them and fostering relationships between them, and this normally means setting up to 4 modules per year or per edition, for physical modules for people to get to know each other and to establish business connections. So the challenge that we had this year with this unfortunate situation that we are living globally was to convert a bootcamp that was thought to happen in Singapore to a digital one, and engage all these participants that are around 200 to 300. We actually had 300 digitally in a very short period of time. So that was the challenge, and that's what we really want to discuss a little bit today. And I think it was successful, and I think it proved that, as Luís was saying, it is feasible and it can happen.
So I want to make questions to all of you. What were your expectations when you knew first that the Free Electrons bootcamp was going to be completely remotely? I want to hear from you, Luís. We can go with you first. What was the first thing that came into your mind?
Again, we do part of we also have another engagement program a little bit more around EDP. It also has a few other partners. It's called Starter. By the way, whoever is seeing this and wants to apply, please go to the Energy Starter. And part of the selection process of that program was already being done like this, in a remote conversation using Zoom. So it was not exactly a novelty. Now we know that the new thing here is that there is a substantial risk that maybe 3/4 or even 100% of free electrons will have to be done remotely, and we don't know exactly what comes out of a program which is 100% remote. But we know that to have a substantial part of a program being done digitally is not a problem. You can still do a lot of stuff, and I mean, eventually at some point people have to meet, or if not for anything else, to connect a PV panel to a battery, But besides that, I think you can still do a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not the same thing. We have to take this into consideration. It's not the same thing. We cannot. It's not. You can't look a startup founder in the eye and really understand what he's trying to do and how good he is. That you lose. But there's also a few things that you can get in exchange for that. It becomes a lot simpler for you to involve more people from your organization. I mean, we had at one of these meetings, maybe it was a Chargetrip meeting, I'm not completely sure, because by the way, Chargetrip is part of Free Electrons this year. We had 29 persons on one single meeting. Now that's not going to happen on a physical bootcamp. So there's advantages, there's disadvantages. It's a different way to do it. We need to learn how to make use of it. And there's one thing that I know for sure is that in the future, after this, we are going to be a lot better at combining, the digital experience with the physical experience. That I'm sure.
Pieter, you want to give us, because you were one of the startups, Electrons, you want to give us the feedback when you heard the first time that it was going to be completely remote?
Yeah, sure. We were very curious actually, because we were also part of the initial batch of free electrons last year, but then our solution didn't match that well with the different utilities. So we at Mafalda's advice, we applied again this year, and then all of a sudden the bootcamp turned from a physical experience like we had in Dublin last year to a digital experience. And what I remember from Dublin last year was that it was a lot of people. Like I don't know the exact number, but it felt like way over 150 people, and it felt like a very intense week in Dublin, full of meetings, full of seminars, full of different speeches, activities, getting to know people, talking about potential projects, getting to know the utilities. So we were very curious as to how would this play out digitally, and at such short notice as well. But what we overall came out of that experience was that the meetings that we had with the utilities were actually maybe even more functional, because it was digital. They were also slightly longer. I think last year they were shorter, and now we had 30 minutes of digital one-on-one meetings with each utility. And it felt that everyone was very clear that this is the only way to understand each other, to meet with one another, and to get information across. We experienced them as super functional. What you do miss is connecting, obviously, on a social level, and especially what you miss is connecting with other startups. For instance, last year we connected with Chris and Nick from EV Energy, and we had a lot of fun with them. And that is what you miss, because that's also one of the upsides of joining such a program, is that you bond with other startups that are in similar positions, and you have a very similar experience as to start a company from the ground up, and you run through the same trials and tribulations. So that is something that you definitely miss. But overall, I was super impressed how smooth it went and how well it went to shift this to a digital boot camp.
Thank you. Mafalda, you want to tell us the experience of going full remote?
Yes, how was that from your side?
Yeah, it's a different perspective because we're more on the concerned side, right? So when we heard the news and when the decision was taken, we were more concerned than really. We didn't know what to expect and how we could do this, because this experience that Luís and Pieter are referring to, the physical bootcamp, is a very complete experience. It's not just about the business and not just about the meetings. It's also about the connections and the relationships. So I think the first thing in our minds was really, how do we convert this physical experience into a digital one as a whole, and not just one side or the other. So the first thing that we had to make sure was that the business was going to happen. So we're talking about a lot of meetings. We're talking about more or less 300 meetings that happen in a week, in 5 days or less. So that's tricky when you're doing a physical bootcamp, but that's way trickier when you're doing it digitally and remotely, especially considering that we had over 30 countries here, over 10 time zones. We had 13 different time zones, so that was challenging, but we had to make sure that those would happen flawlessly, because the utilities had to connect with the startups and had to understand their value, how could they solve problems together and make decisions at the end of the bootcamp. So that was critical. But one of the things that we were sure of is that Free Electrons is a program of people and of connections. So we had to bring this magic along. And of course, we couldn't have dinners together, and we couldn't go out and see the views of Singapore. But there were things that we could do, and we tried to do them. We tried to, as much as possible, bring this proximity and physicality to the bootcamp. Of course, it's not the same, and we felt it wasn't the same. I guess I felt that what Luís was saying a lot, the fact that you do see eye to eye, but you can't really understand the body language, and you can really understand people as a whole. So it's different, but we tried, and I think we did a lot of things that brought excitement to the program. So not just being technical and cold and sharp with the business, but being more friendly and energized. So we had this WhatsApp channel that was always rolling with information and communication and energizers. We had a keynote speaker that brought trends and knowledge and got people excited about what we're doing here and what innovation is. We had, proper formal communication channels so people wouldn't get lost in the virtual world. It could happen. It's not just, it's harder to tell people where to go in a virtual world, because you can see it and it's more conceptual. So we had these different channels, and I think we brought the whole package. Of course, it's not a package like you would have in Singapore. It's a different one. But I think it worked in many levels.
Thank you. We already have some questions here. I just want to tell everyone, and remember everyone that are listening, we are being live not only on YouTube, but on several Facebook pages. If you are making questions there, just remember that we cannot see the questions on the Facebook pages. We can only see the questions on YouTube. So if you want to make a question, just go to the Beta YouTube channel. You see that we have a link there that we are live, and you can make a question there. Okay. So let's go for a question from the public. Do you agree that an improvised balance between physical and remote sessions will become the new normal for any kind of project after the crisis? Also, thinking on a sustainable level. Oh, actually, this is like a very good question because all of this happens. Do you think that will be some kind of like symbiosis between the remote and like the present one? So I think that it will be like two phases. First, the completely remote phase, and the second one, more filters, everybody will go out together. How do you think that this balance between physical and remote sessions? Do you want to go? Who want to go first here?
I think that's a very good point. It will definitely accelerate the learning of where's the right balance, where's the efficient balance that we can strike on using these tools that we've been using, to be honest, a lot so far, but that we are now forced to use much more in situations that we kind of thought that they were not useful. Now they have to be used, and so they are useful in a way. I think we are right now in an accelerated learning process of exactly what can we do digitally and how efficient can we be, because efficiency here is going to be extremely important. Um, we are all with this thing hanging around, what's the size of the economic crisis that we are going to have? Well, efficiency is a way to get around economic crisis, and more digital ways of working will be a part of the solution to getting out of the economic problem. So I think it's a quite good point. Things are merging, or they were already merged, but now we are more aware that we can do more stuff digitally, and this is going to produce a different working reality, applicable to innovation teams, to startups, to accelerators, to all of us.
Yeah, I think if I can, I think just
Of
taking on
course.
the efficiency, the efficiency topic. I think one of the things that we've seen with this bootcamp was that, and also related to sustainability, really, you had more people involved because they didn't have to travel, and because sometimes traveling just to have two meetings is not possible. So more people were involved. So what we are seeing right now is that because the business units, or we had meetings with 29 people, so innovation business units talking to the startups, talking to more people from the startups as well, that can give quicker answers and more accurate answers on the spot. What we see is that is allowing for decisions to be made sooner. So because the business units were engaged earlier on, they are able to tell with a more sustained reasoning, I really want to work with this startup because I think this is a very good solution. And because we're keeping it digital until the next module, meetings are continuing digitally, and the business units are already talking to startups about potential pilots. So that's an efficiency gain, and an increase in the time to innovation that should be considered, because I think it's very different from what we've seen at least last year, and at least within Free Electrons.
And if you allow me to add one thing on that, you probably have seen that in previous editions we had people connecting computers, basically to have someone from the business units also joining in a physical meeting. That was happening, but that was happening in a very limited number, and to a certain extent that has to do with the fact that there are many people in our organizations that actually don't like to have meetings like this, or thought that they didn't like to have meetings like this. Nowadays, everyone is forced to having meetings like this, and so that resistance is also going to erode completely after this problem. Just to add on what you were saying.
Yeah, then also building on the sustainability argument, which I think that free electrons is also about. I mean, it is, I think, also about electric utility companies transitioning in a global energy transition where they need to find new business models, new ways of operations. So also that we didn't fly over 100 people, I guess, to different continents is also actually a very big benefit. But I also agree that having more people join in from the utilities is for us a massive benefit. Like as a software company, we are very used to working remote, working digital. We have an office in Amsterdam and in Romania. We have customers all over the world. So it is not a massive transition, but actually getting the right people from the right business units at the table, that is for a startup dealing with large corporates the biggest challenge, because it is super hard to navigate a corporate enterprise that you don't know by heart. You don't know who does what, who is responsible for what, especially in new areas like e-mobility, and I guess where other startups that join Free Electrons are working in advanced electric solutions as well. It is very hard to navigate a bigger company like EDP. So having everyone around the table that is actually relevant or who wants to discover if a startup solution could be relevant for their business unit, yeah, that is super valuable. And I think that this new balance of physical and digital should actually be a very great example moving forward. So well done, Beta E. You did well.
And like by saying, Luís, you were mentioning, and this is a question. Luís was mentioning that more than 20 people were involved in meetings. Does the digital experience create more engagement from the teams? Does that support faster, better innovation? What's your intake in here?
Well, in a way, yes, because it makes people, it facilitates having people available, you know. I think to a certain extent, people are at home, and the opportunity to participate in the program was also very appealing. So that helps to build up the numbers. But I think so by creating the opportunity of having more people present at the same time in a meeting, that's positive in terms of engagement. Naturally, there's that, you know, there's the human factor, which, you know, decreases a little bit because we are, you know, all looking at screens. 2D people is not exactly the same. So there's that effect. But again, if we in the future start to, you know, identify the best moments to use a physical meeting and the best moments to use a remote meeting, I think that the work is going to improve massively. We have this huge resource that we were just not using, and now we are using.
Exactly, and just to reinforce what you said earlier, I completely agree with your point where there were some struggling of some people before these Zoom calls and have the calls, you know, by Zoom. But now I really think that after all of this, when we arrange a meeting, even on the office, it will be like a Zoom call first, and we'll see if it's face to face.
Look, and people that were resisting it, you know, nowadays they are stuck at home. They are, you know, either they go and take care of their kids or they
Exactly.
go to the Zoom meeting. So they'll go to the Zoom meeting.
Exactly, and I think that's the one of the best intakes of all of this. I think efficiency will become more and more present on the meetings after all of this. So, Francisco Ribeiro has a question. In your respective roles, how do you usually balance incremental versus disruptive change? Additionally, how does the role of external change, like the current crisis, affect the balance? Well, this is some questions on a big one, but okay, let's go with the first one. In your respective roles, how do you usually balance incremental versus disruptive change? Who wants to go first? Pieter, you want to go first here?
Yeah. I think that over the years, I've come to respect incremental change more because I naturally lean towards probably more disruptive change, looking at bigger forces that impact industries, where people are going, what people actually want to do. I've been very like in prior to Chargetrip, I had several other companies, innovation agencies, startup, and I was always looking as to where are people going in the long term, and creating solutions for that, and that results often in pretty different solutions than the current state. And I've also noticed that getting people towards that long-term point on the horizon, and towards that radical change, requires multiple smaller steps and smaller incremental change. So um, you can have a good idea and you can be too early, which we experienced actually last year. We make software, navigation software specifically for electric cars, and last year most utility company, our um, solution was maybe a bit too geared towards a more mature EV market than most utilities were operating in at the moment.
Yeah.
So you can be definitely too early, too fast. So I've come to respect more gradual change better, but I appreciate that a shock like what is happening now with the world is actually a wonderful opportunity to enforce more radical change, because the context is completely different. And there is a tremendous opportunity for us to come out of this crisis and start doing things different. That it shows problems with how we are currently operating. That for the first time, for instance, since World War II, in parts of India, you can all of a sudden see the Himalayas again because the air is clear. That I can, from my home in Amsterdam, look at a sky that doesn't have a gazillion airline stripes through it, which I know cause a lot of pollution. That in Venice, the canals are all of a sudden clear, that all over the world, air pollution has gone down.
Yeah.
So even though the oil price is at an historic low, it would be a tremendous waste of this one crisis opportunity to go back to the exact same way of operating as we used to do, and maybe think with all of us that, okay, can we operate on the same level of happiness, but maybe be a little less bad for the world. So, you know, it's also a great opportunity for to enforce more radical changes, I think.
Really nice opinion. And I completely. Luís, your opinion here?
Yeah, sure. We EDP Innovation uses the Innovation Horizons framework from McKinsey. So the Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3 thing, where Horizon 1 is, you know, stuff that's adjacent to the core business, and Horizon 3 is the really disruptive stuff, and 2 is in the middle. We, as a unit, we are more, our mission is to look more to Horizon 3 and a little bit of Horizon 2 stuff. But naturally, what Pieter said makes a lot of sense. And in our interactions with the business unit, sometimes we have to compromise a little bit and go on, on a more stepped approach, with something that's useful almost immediately, and then going to the big picture, the really disruptive stuff that can come next. So that's more or less how we position ourselves. Our goal is to look for disruptive stuff. We do understand that we just cannot leave out there incremental stuff that has quality, because that can also be a good thing for the businesses. I will tend also to agree with Pieter on what he said about what's happening right now. I mean, we are going through a massive demonstration of the power of collective action, and certainly the massive issue that we have with climate change and the need to have a strategy for energy transition. I think that's going to, well, I hope at least that's going to benefit a lot from the mess where we are in right now, because it's not coordinated action. That's probably one thing that's worth noting. But what most states in the world are doing show that it shows clearly that we can do significant sacrifices when our survival is at stake. And climate change is all about that. In the end, it's whether we take care of planet A, or we have to find some form of planet B, which no one knows what it is. So I do believe that it's perhaps feasible to well, let me put it like this. It's something that I hope is to find people taking more bold actions with regards to climate change, because this crisis is demonstrating that when the going gets tough, you can take those actions.
And just to tell that Elon Musk is thinking on the plan B with a planet B on going to Mars fast. So, but yeah, I completely agree with Peter. Mafalda, do you want to give your intake here?
Yeah, hopefully that's not the solution, not the planet B. Very sad. I think that for BTI, our the way we see things is different. We are connectors, so we try to connect startups with corporates, and we want to make the startups world and the entrepreneurs grow. So we have this mission of making them grow. So I think we're very much, and taking on Luís and McKinsey's approach, we are very much focused in our H2, in our open innovation programs, for instance, for sure, because we really believe in how we are doing this and how this collaboration can work. We really want to the corporates, and in Electrons, the utilities, to test out the solutions, to test them quickly, to test them the simplest way possible, and to understand if this is a solution that can be deployed afterwards in their companies. So we look into them. I think BTI is a very disruptive business by itself, because it found that a collaborative innovation years ago was the way to go. So I think we actually disrupted the market in that sense. We're not alone, but we made it real. And in terms of the crisis, I would say, and not really thinking of disruptive or incremental innovation, but thinking of innovation as it is and what it means. I think that sometimes people tend to think that innovation is like this beautiful and nice to have thing in companies that really it's not that necessary, and it's not the core of the business, and it's not that. But I think that what innovation is, and what innovation is supposed to do, is push businesses forward. And so I think that finding new solutions can mean, and especially in a crisis, it can mean reducing costs. It can mean finding new revenue sources. So it's super critical in a time where uncertainty is a reality, and when the core business is struggling. So I think that innovation is really an ally. Being innovative or disruptive, it can be disruptive because you can really find new markets and new trends, but it doesn't have to be radical, or I think it just needs to serve its own purpose. I do think besides all the climate change and the bigger things, we're seeing this innovation happening in all the business models reshaping that we are seeing every day. So all the Instagram businesses that are just rising, the coffee shops that are now delivering things, everything that turned into a digital content just to cope with this situation. I think these are excellent examples of innovation, and that is radical because it's a new source of revenue, perhaps, and that can really keep going in the future. And I think in these times of crisis, what we really need to think of is who are we in times of crisis, and how can we be the best of ourselves for now and for the future. And that's my take.
Thank you. And I agree with everything that you said about BTI, by the way. Just just want to tell you. That is a question that I passed that I didn't notice. Is there a space for? Is there a space for? I'm sorry. I'll try to spell this right. Okay. Is there a space for serendipity in business done remotely?
Serendipity, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Was- So,
There is.
who wants to go first
Yeah.
here?
I think probably we still need some tools to evolve in making that easier to happen. You know, serendipity clearly happens in when you just connect people and they are usually at the same place. Maybe it doesn't need to be at the same place, but usually at the same place. And they occasionally meet, and some random idea then certainly becomes the most important thing for two or three persons, and they go for it. um, I still I am still not seeing that so easy to happen on a conversation like this, but I'm always open for it. So I don't know. I think serendipity comes a lot from human interaction. So
Yeah.
to try to summarize, it comes a lot from human interaction, and that usually you get a little bit more of that if you are talking physically close to someone. But the world is changing, and these things will evolve for sure.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to give your intake here?
Um, yeah, so in the physical world, when serendipity is really powerful, is when you meet someone and all of a sudden understand that you might be interested in the same subject or working on a similar problem, and you really didn't expect that. And I think it is super powerful when that happens in the physical world and in real life, and you're standing at a bar and you have a glass of wine, and this happens, and you have a great evening, and this is followed up by actual doing stuff together. And where in the digital world I see this happen the most is actually on platforms. For instance, for us, most relevant are LinkedIn and Twitter on a communication side, but also on for our developers on GitHub, where when you share the stuff that you are working on, and when you share also the problems that you are facing, or share the stuff that you have developed or invented or all of a sudden have an answer to, then also in the digital world, people find you and all of a sudden acknowledge and recognize that they are working on similar problems. And I think that one of the solutions to emulate serendipity in the digital world is actually by sharing the stuff that you are really working on and that you really care about. And people will find you, and you will find new connections that will bring you further. But also then be transparent about the stuff that you're struggling with, and be transparent on the way that um, things you will still need data for or need answers to. So it's not only about broadcasting how clever you are, but it's also about opening up on the stuff that you're struggling with. And usually there is an answer out there, and that would be my digital take on serendipity.
Do you think as you were speaking, I was almost looking at it as something that changes a lot, also as people change to a certain extent? Do you think that, as next generation, whatever letter we are going to attribute to the next generation, do you think that they will be even more prone to stuff like that?
I think so. I think that um, looking at, I think when I started working, I made my first email address when I was at university. Um, my son of 10 has two email addresses, but he doesn't look at them. So it's already old technology for him. It's like a fax machine. Um, his solution for the physical and digital is is very different from what I'm used to. I see my 7-year-old son during these weeks of lockdown having a blast with his friends playing Brawl Stars on God knows what kind of devices and having a voice channel open on WhatsApp and having a great time and us just trying to keep them off the screens because we think they should play outside, but they can't really go outside because we're in lockdown. So I think yes, it will be very different, and the merging of the physical and the digital will become different, and it will become clearer what you need when and why. And it's not going to be either or; it's going to be and. So it's going to be uh, a whole array of digital solutions mixed in with physical and calling over the phone and writing a letter from time to time, maybe that will keep us afloat, I think.
Thank you, Mafalda.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm all for serendipity in a digital world because I've witnessed it. I think that it's obviously a frame serendipity because you can't really just be on the street and it's different. It needs to be within a platform or some sort of frame. But I've witnessed that. We've done in our bootcamp, we've done these digital happy hours, and they were not very programmed. Some of them were more than others. In the last one wasn't really. So it was just we wanted to explore how people would behave informally, and if they didn't have a script to follow and no one to guide that script. And what happened was one of the most beautiful moments of the bootcamp for me, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one, because not only we started with an energizer, that was the first thing that was programmed, and then we followed with whatever. So we had people sharing music, we had people sharing the views and the walk that they were doing, and at the end we had Luís Manuel actually sharing this beautiful poem that relates a lot to what we are going through. It's an Irish poem and that's beautiful. And we
It's not.
had one of
It
the
was not
start.
my idea. Someone sent that to me.
Yeah, exactly. Serendipity. Someone sent that to Luís Manuel, and in that right moment, he shared that with us. So we had one of the startups, Mala from Intelligence. She read the poem beautifully, and it was one of the best moments. So it was a connection moment, really, and it was a serendipity moment because we understood that we had a lot in common, and actually the poem was a lot about that as well. We were all facing the same struggles these days, and we need to overcome them together. Beautiful moment. I know it's a more poetic one, but I'm sure that there are many opportunities out there for that. And some of the startups actually, as Peter was saying in the beginning, he missed that relationship with the startups, and some of the startups asked us, can I set up a coffee, a digital coffee, obviously coffee hour with another startup or with a utility? And yeah, you can. And because people are changing their behaviors and because people are accepting this to be the new normal, yes, okay, let's just go for a coffee, and you have a digital coffee, and that is going to start to be okay. So I'm a true believer in that, and I think that's the future. And I agree with you, Peter, as well, that it's going to be a combination of multiple things from now on. Also, the things that make us more human, like the older stuff and the newer stuff.
Thank you for your input here. And I also play Brawl Stars, as you can imagine, Peter. So now let's. Claudia asked, "Do we need more open innovation programs in order to create change and impact, even at a sustainable level?" Luís?
Uh, I mean, broadly speaking, I think so. I think we need much more bets on open innovation than the ones we have now. We see very different types of companies with different attitudes here. I mean, when we look, for instance, at the Portuguese ecosystem, and this is a little bit, I think, the negative side of it. we don't have enough corporates doing significant bets on open innovation. And even in some cases, some that do, they are looking more into the PR aspect of it than looking for solutions that come through that process. So more programs, I think, is part of the solution. It's not only that; it's people genuinely looking at open innovation as a decisive tool to remain competitive, even to survive as organizations. I don't believe that any company that tries to hold on to their business model and to their value chain or whatever they want to call it, without learning from the outside and onboarding nowadays. In the past, learning was probably enough. Nowadays, learning is not enough anymore because the corporate structures are not flexible enough to accommodate the wave of change that we are facing right now. So you can just forget about just learning with what the others are doing and not doing it yourself, or not partnering with others. Partner to do with your own resources, but a lot more to partner is fundamental for any company that wants to survive. It's as simple as that. If you close yourself around your organization, around only your persons, you are going to die as a business. Zero doubts about that.
And there is, I was seeing a stand-up comedy show a couple of days ago, and the guy said something like the mail system, the primary mail company in the US was going through a crisis because they were using a 300 years old business model and they didn't innovate. And yeah, exactly. Maybe they need an open innovation program to know how to innovate. So I completely agree with you. And just let me make you a follow-up questions. Do you think that after this crisis, or even during this crisis, these big corporations will need more and more open innovation for what's to come? I think that they will benefit more now than ever.
Well, I think, and that's a little bit of a concern I have, not so much with my company, because I think this is very well understood by the management at all levels. But I think that there may be this temptation from many other organizations to save costs looking at the innovation units and at innovation projects and all of that. And I think that's a mistake, because that's going to throw a lot of expertise out of the window. Of course, some other people will get that expertise if people start shutting down their own programs. But I think that's almost a human reaction to to maybe a few months, maybe a few years, I don't know.
Yeah.
One does. That are going to be tough, economically speaking. I do believe that these unfortunate events are showing us that we can do a lot if we really believe we need to do it. And that's perhaps the most positive message that we can take out of this. We are, again, going back to that collective action wording. It's not coordinated, but at least it's everyone realizing that they have to do something to solve the problem. The demonstration of the power of this action, I think, is quite revealing, and I think it shows people that you cannot expect that the problems will solve by themselves. Everything is changing around you, so you should learn. You should adapt. You should make those. When we are talking about innovation, we are fundamentally talking about bets. And I believe that if after this crisis people don't understand that in order to survive they need to bet on a few solutions, then they have learned nothing.
Mafalda, you want to go next? Just to change the order here.
I can, yeah. Well, I'm PTI is a big defender of open innovation programs. So yes, of course, we will always say yes to more, because we know that they work, and we know that we know the kind of benefits that they bring to the ecosystem, and I mean corporates and startups. So not just thinking about ones or the others. So in times of crisis, and just taking on what I've said before about what innovation is and can mean for businesses, I think that yes, and I think there's still in some markets and in some sectors and in some companies this big fear of investing in the wrong horses, like Luis was saying. People need to understand that they have to bet, and I think that they don't realize that open innovation programs, obviously if done properly and adequately and cautiously, they can be very positive, and they can help in terms of crisis to do the things I've said before: reduce costs, be more efficient, find new sources of revenues, find new products to sell, new services to give to the customers, new ways of relating to the customers, and so on. So I think that they are critical, and I'm all for collaboration. So I always also believe that after what we've been through, that's the way to go. I think that we've seen this in many crises before, that collaboration happens. We've seen that engagement of the startups and the growth of startups after a crisis happens. We've seen that 10 years ago. I think we can see that again now, not for the best reasons, because people will need to build new businesses, and those new businesses will need to be supported by by corporates, by big corporates, because they will also need them. So I think it's a win-win situation for us. It's what I believe in.
Thank you, Pieter.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Luis and Mafalda on also from the point that big corporates should embrace this collaboration with startups. But then from the startup point of view, programs like Free Electrons and being able to work on projects and proof of concepts and getting to know the actual people who are driving change within big corporates is of tremendous value. And I think that um, as a startup, you have an initial idea and you think that you have found a problem where you believe that you can actually create a solution for, but you also need your customers. You need people who believe in your solution and help you along the way, because you are doing this with a couple of people in an office, working night and day, investing all your money, but you're doing this on also a lot of assumptions, on assumptions that you think you know what your customer needs and what, for instance, big corporates also needs, but you don't understand that complete picture because you just don't have it, because you're there in your, well,
Yeah.
let's say your garage office. So working in real life with big corporates and their different departments and understanding their real life problems and how to improve your solution to fit within their world is of tremendous value. And I hope that more corporates understand this, because when they do, I think it creates a lot of synergy, both for corporates and for the startup scene, because they need those customers.
Thank you. I'll ask the question that is this: how do you try to foresee this disruption potential, the disruption potential of innovation slash technology and so on? Are you making new scenarios for the future, given this extreme situation? How are you going from it? So does anyone want to go first here?
Yeah, so for us, it was really looking at our costs, and trying to see if we were spending money on things we really didn't need, and if we could keep cash flow under better control than we were already having. However, we are also seeing on a commercial side that we have potential business leads and qualified leads putting projects on hold. But at the same time, I'm also having completely new conversations with people I wasn't having a couple of weeks ago. So for us, it was. We believe that in the short to midterm, it will have effect on our revenue, by which we need to keep costs under control, and we've done everything to align there. But we also see that in the long run, we still believe that the switch to electric mobility will be happening, and especially with bigger corporate clients, you see that ball has started rolling, and that is also a little bit keeping rolling. So it seems
Yeah.
for now. Maybe if I look back at this in 12 months' time, I thought, God, how could you have said this? But for
Happens to
now,
everyone.
for now, it looks like it's still going ahead with especially with bigger customers.
Does Mafalda or Luís wants to give their input here? Luís?
Do you want to go, Mafalda?
I can. I think this question came from BTI, so I think that I'm not the what they're looking for, but I can tell you, obviously, this is disrupting our business as well. We've done it all, I think, looking into the costs, and also we're more focused in how this is going to affect our clients. We're a service company, so looking into listening to our clients and really understanding how we can shift the products that we have and the services that we have, and come up with new products and services. And I think we are an innovation company, so we should be taking this as an opportunity to really build new products that can be adapted to the market, to the needs of our customers right now, to any kind of different targets that we didn't explore before, making sure that our mission is fulfilled, and we keep building the innovation ecosystem. And that's it.
Yeah, makes sense. Look, on our side, there's this immediate, I would say, shorter term concern around the companies in which we have invested. Also around a few projects that are a little bit more sensitive in terms of what's going on right now, in terms of either cash needs or its application gets significantly disrupted because of the decrease of activity that we are
Yeah.
facing. Just for you to have an idea, we could be talking about a decrease of around 15% in power consumption, broadly speaking. It's relevant.
Yeah.
Even if residential consumption is increasing, by the way, the overall consumption is not.
Just Luís, how much is residential increasing?
I don't have those numbers, but it must be increasing a lot. I see that on my power bill.
We all see it. Since I start streaming, I'm waiting for the bill to come.
Yeah, it's a lot more kilowatt hours. Not twice as more, but maybe 50% as more on my user profile at least. How does that translate into the overall household here in Portugal or in any other country? I don't know. I would love to have those numbers. But in terms of the short-term scenarios, there are these concerns. So we've issued a number of recommendations to the companies in which we have invested. Cash is king at this moment. So whatever you don't need to spend, don't spend it. That's fundamental. There are more difficult issues with companies that were in the middle of a fundraising process. So that's a difficult situation because investors are a lot more defensive right now, and we have a few of those, and we are trying to make sure that everything goes smoothly. I think the most interesting part of that question is what we don't know. And to be honest, yeah, we do work with some scenarios, but we don't know what's this going to what type of change is this going to cause in the future to come. We are certainly challenging people to think about that and to think about the opportunity. So, for instance, we know that for the startups, and Pieter was touching that issue. For the startups, this is a relevant moment in terms of business development, because you have more time, and you know that people have more time, and you can try to connect with more people during this period. It could be a good way to, once the crisis stops, for you to develop a few extra sales, to hopefully more than compensate what you have lost in the period. But in terms of the impact that this is going to have structurally in the, for instance, in the power sector, it's very hard to predict at this point. I think I want to believe that that sustainability will continue to be a priority. That we want to use this in a positive manner and not in a detrimental manner towards the goals that many countries, companies, and people have committed to. The 2050 goals of getting basically getting rid of carbon emissions, or getting to a carbon neutral position, rather speaking. It's not completely clear at this moment how is this going to affect technological developments that we need to achieve those goals. I do think I'm an optimistic person. So I do think that this is showing us that we can do a lot if we just realize the risks, because what was done in a few months is massive. Of course, it has consequences. It has economic consequences for sure. But if you put on the balance, the what would have happened if you didn't apply these measures, and if you apply that same balance to the climate change problem, I think only positive stuff can come out of that. If people are, if people are, human, looking at that balance, they will have to take action. Yeah.
And I think that is also just to justify why I still think that people don't take climate change so serious, because it's going for so long, and it's a long-term situation, and this is like in a couple of months we're all going to have a huge problem if we don't act like right now. I think that if the message gets out that this is like now, this is the now, we are there, I think that I completely agree with you that the message will pass.
I'm still hoping for someone to discover a connection between climate change and COVID-19.
that will be awesome. Now they are making connections between the 5G towers and COVID, so they are still not there yet. So let me just have a follow-up question, some curiosity. We see a lot of VCs not investing and safeguarding their portfolio right now. Are you still investing on companies, or are you just like having the money off the fund and only investing on follow-ups and stuff like that?
Well, this makes it difficult for you to complete a due diligence. So we are not closing the possibilities of investment. We are looking at new stuff. To be honest, we don't know when can we complete an investment, because ideally it should be possible to visit the company, know the more important persons before you do the deal. And we are not exactly sure when can we do that, but we believe that this is not going to last a year. So
we hope not. Yeah,
I hope so, at least. We believe that we need to be ready, and we do want to maintain the activity and keep the opportunity flow coming. What you've mentioned about the investees is also important. Yeah, we need to be a little bit extra careful. Let's put it like this: a little bit extra careful in order to make sure that if a company that we believe deserves it has a problem, and we need to support it, that we can support it.
Yeah.
So every investor needs to take that into consideration right now. But to be honest, I see a lot of corporate and non-corporate VCs still actively looking and talking to companies. I think everyone wants to make the most out of this period, and even if it's hard, I will not say it's impossible, because nothing is impossible. But even if it's hard to complete a deal at this stage, everyone wants to be, with full steam ahead when that possibility comes a little bit becomes a little bit easier.
And the valuations will go down. This is a normal consequence of the startup's valuation will go down. So if the funds still invest, they will get better deals. So it's I think this is like a normal consequence of crisis or something.
I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose what you're saying makes sense, but I'm not completely sure if we can just assume that the valuations will go down just like that.
Nice.
I'm not completely sure because the situation we are facing is completely new. People are not doing the deals fundamentally because of two things: because concerns around the economic environment and the impossibility of physically visiting the companies. But once you remove that impossibility, how quick is the market going to recover? That's the key question here. That is the key question here. And startups are businesses that look a lot into the long term as well. If you are convinced that this is a crisis that takes a year or two to pass, that will have some effect for sure, but that doesn't change the long term prospect. Most of the companies that became incredibly successful, that reached unicorn stages, they were still not profitable when reaching that stage.
Yeah. Thank you. It's I've been speaking with a lot of investors, and your input is really great. Thank you.
I want to leave optimistic messages all over.
So Pieter, so do you want to give your intake here on the first question? Like, how do we try to foresee? We're speaking like I just got lost because we started speaking about investment. Help me a little bit here. We were talking about about the Anna question, Mafalda, right?
Yeah, I think we did that.
Yeah.
I think we are missing one that's in YouTube from I think Daniela.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go for Daniela Basile question. What, in your opinion, is the one thing we should aim in terms of experience when collaborating remotely? Pieter?
What I learned from collaborating remotely is that there is a maximum to number of participants in a conference call, which I think, like, of active participants, right? So I think it's around 4 to 5.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Being doable. If it's more, it becomes a YouTube show, right? Then it's just broadcasting, and people and the other people should be the audience. Yeah, I think that's what I learned, that there's a maximum where video conferencing works really well, and beyond it becomes very confusing very, very fast if you don't treat it like, okay, it's a performance or it's a show where you just want to share information and other people consume information. So I think that's what I learned, and then so that there should be sort of, I don't know, new etiquette towards that or something like that, but I haven't figured it out completely.
Mafalda?
Agree, and I think that we try to build some etiquette guidelines for the bootcamp, and I think we're going to explore that a little bit more because we felt the need as well. I agree with that totally, Pieter, and it's one of the things that we keep thinking about for the next modules is how can we do that more feasible. But in going back to the question, I think that what we need to aim and what I've particularly really learned with this experience is we need to make sure we have all the technical aspects covered, so that if we're talking about a business process, the business needs to happen, and it needs to happen seamlessly and flawlessly. But I think that these digital experiences really require us to not forget that we are humans and that we need a human touch. So everything that can help improve that human connection, being it technical or being it an outside process, outside things that can help foster this connectivity and it helps to be as human as possible within the digital world.
Thank you. Luís, you want to say something?
I think they said it all. It's I fully agree with what Mafalda and Pieter said. Nothing else to add. It's just that realization of something that we already knew, which is you can do stuff like this. Yeah, you can.
So, we are getting to the end. I'll ask all of you, Luís, Pieter, and Mafalda, what you are going on like right now in your companies, the programs that are active, the message that you want to pass in the end. And yeah, I'll give you 2 minutes each to speak a little bit about your things that's going on. And then we will close the podcast. Who wants to go first here? Pieter, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So what we are working on is I'm actually sitting in my new office, which we were moving towards in the middle, like in the first week of the lockdown in the Netherlands. So it's half finished, and there's a lot of boxes around me. We just closed our first outside funding round in February. So we were
Congratulations.
lucky that cash flow wise we were in a really good place, which also means that we are still hiring, continuing with the hiring plan that we set out. So over the last 3 weeks, we have onboarded 4 new people. I sent out a employment contract today to someone I've never physically met, so that's a first. A couple of the hires we met previously physically, so yeah, it's actually I find the transition to be pretty good. And apart from that, we are obviously looking towards extending our commercial base. So really looking forward to having pilot talks with all the utility companies and see if we can integrate our route planning API into the EV driver applications of the different utility companies, or do a more basic solution of integrating a route planner on their websites for their e-mobility customers. And it's really cool to see that the utilities of free electrons have moved so much further with their e-mobility strategies as opposed to last year. So I'm actually, even though these are weird and difficult times, I'm actually really looking forward to the next couple of weeks exploring what's possible with the different utilities.
Thank you. Luís?
So besides free elections that we are, as usual, taking very seriously and trying to engage with as much as possible startups from the program, we have what I already mentioned, the Startup Business Accelerator going on, actually with the support of Beta I as well. It's a different team. It's not Mafalda, but it's a very good team as well. And that's a program that also excites us a lot. We usually interact with around 30 startups every year, and get a lot of interesting solutions and a lot of deals done as well in that program. And actually, some of them then migrate into free electrons as well, which is something we really enjoy. Besides that, we are taking this opportunity, like I mentioned before, to try to have some of our programs evolving into a more digital type of solution, like the innovation immersion programs I've mentioned. So this can be a really game changer for us, because when with a physical program we can only intake around 50 persons every year. Doing 3 or 4 programs with something digital, we could potentially massify the access to this knowledge and to this experience from EDP's people. Besides that, we are also taking this opportunity to try to create a common platform to all innovation units inside EDP. in terms of deal flows, in terms of even budget sharing and knowledge sharing. For sure, that already happens, but still trying to improve that coordination. Just for you to have an idea, we are not, by all means, we are not the only innovation unit inside EDP. We are just the kind of innovation enabler inside the group, and all the business units have their own units, and they are completely independent from us. And we actually like it to be like that, because that generates a lot of initiative. And in innovation, to be honest, the power of initiative is a lot higher than the value of efficiency. So we are just trying to combine all of these units in a set of similar platforms, digital platforms. That's what we are talking about, and trying to make sure that more positive stuff comes out of that.
Thank you so much. Mafalda, what's going on Beta? Tell us.
Yeah, a lot is going on in Betty. So I think I've mentioned before, we are taking this time to, rethink our products a little bit, especially our open innovation programs. Not only a lot of them also concerning startups and lots of things, but this digital side is obviously one of them. So we're taking these learnings that we have from the virtual bootcamp of Electrons, and we're going to replicate that, thinking about the whole experience and how to improve that to make it a product really that can be blended into physical programs in the future, or can just work out for themselves. And I'm sorry for the background noise here. And and we've been working hard on a new brand that I think going to really show and really tell what BTI is all about, and make it clearer for our audience of what we can do for them. And I think that's our biggest concern, is we are all about collaborative innovation, and we are working into making that clear and sharper, so we can help more corporates and more startups out there growing and succeeding, especially in these times of crisis.
Thank you, Mafalda. And what's going on with my company is the same of what's going on with Mafalda's company. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
You are at the beach, José.
Yeah. Like I'm on holidays, like you can see. I'm going to take a swim later. Thank you all. Thank you to our guests, Luís, Pieter, and Mafalda for being here. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for it. We hope that we all work together again for a long time, and we build this collaboration relationship for a long time. And thank you all for all the viewers on